So, my mom left the picture when I was 3. She literally packed up one day and just walked out. So, for a long time it was just my dad and I. I am a male, and at the time my dad met Tammy, I was 13. I was chubby and at the time small for my age. I still had my baby fat. I was and still am a nerd. So is my dad, and we share a love of Star Wars, comic books and science fiction. My dad decided he needed to meet someone. He was lonely and I thought it would be nice to have a mother figure. This was before online dating and there was still personals in the paper. My dad filled out an ad and it wasn't long before he met Tammy. I remember him telling me about her and how happy he looked. They dated for a month before my dad figured it was getting serious and he wanted to introduce me to her. So my dad decided to take us out for dinner, then a movie. I remember my grandma helping me to get dressed and I was super nervous to meet her. She seemed nice at first, but even at that age I could sense something was off. We went to Sizzler's for dinner and my dad told me to order whatever I liked. He then excused himself to the bathroom. I smiled at Tammy, went to say something and she cuts me off, telling me my dad's been letting me eat whatever I wanted and that I'm a fat little piggy. She demonstrated this by actually fucking making pig noises. I was crushed. I mean, honestly, I wasn't very heavy, maybe a little chubby, but no obese like some children are today. My dad actually didn't let me eat whatever I wanted, but anyways, back to the story. She ignored me until my dad came back and then played nice. I, for my dad's sake, faked being nice to her. I wanted to tell my dad what she said, but I didn't want to disappoint him or upset him. My dad was and is my best friend. Anyway, so I hoped and prayed my dad would realize what a bitch she was and come to his senses but sadly, no, he didn't. They dated steadily and when I was 15, Tammy moved in. Now that summer I finally lost my baby fat and grew like a good foot or two. My dad's 6'3", so it wasn't surprising that I shot up to almost 6 feet by age 15. Puberty kicked in too, and my voice was doing that weird cracking thing. I made it a point to avoid Tammy. I went to school, came home and stayed in my room, did homework and wait for my dad to get home. However, she started in on the most days as soon as I walked in. She'd always find something. I was a loser, I was stupid, etc. Just cruel, mean things. The few times I told my dad, he just insisted we all needed to adjust. So I just decided I could put up with her for 3 more years, for my dad's sake, then I was out of there. The next 3 years sucked. Her insults got meaner. She also would do things like put glass, pieces of paper and sand in my food. And just my plate, I started refusing to eat her food. I was terrified she'd poison me. It was around this time my dad and her got married. Graduation came. I was so relieved. I was set to enlist in the army. I planned on being in basic by July, but of course she had to try to ruin that. My recruiter got a call from someone saying I smoked pot and did drugs. Thankfully I passed my drug test, but I know it was her. One night before I left for boot camp, my dad had a huge party for me. She had tried to cancel it earlier, claiming she was sick, but by that point my dad had already invited most of my family and friends and wasn't going to cancel. She pouted the entire time. I started to see that my dad was kinda starting to see past her facade. Let's skip a few more years. And I get leave. I've been deployed twice now. And I hadn't seen my dad in 22 months, so I was dying to see him. He had told me in previous conversations that their marriage was pretty much over. She not only was controlling and verbally abusive, but a few weeks prior, she had knocked my dad out with a cast iron skillet. He had given her an ultimatum of a month to get out, or he was throwing her the crap out. The night I got in was late. My dad picked me up and we came home. She was gone, supposedly. She had started moving her crap into her sister's and was pretty much staying most nights there. So Dad and I eat and we get to bed. Around 1, I feel my bed move. I'm exhausted and figure it's my dad's dog Caesar, a German Shepherd. That's when I feel hands go around my neck and my soldier instinct kicks in. I flip the intruder over and subdue them. My dad runs in and flips the light on. He's got his guns out. Surprise, surprise, it's my stepmonster. Dad calls the police, files a restraining order, serves her with divorce papers. A lot more shit happens, such as her destroying my dad's new Mercedes, but I won't bore you with details. What matters is they're divorced, and I never have to see that bitch again. So Tommy, let's not ever meet again. I am a 21-year-old senior in college, living with 3 other girls in an old one-story house. We are located about a 15-minute walk from main campus, and the majority of our neighbors are college students. That being said, this town is notorious for being a little, well, sketchy. Millie is home to one of the first insane asylums built in America. After the majority of it being closed down / abandoned for years, the final building was shut down about a month ago and the remaining patients were released. Now, I doubt this is directly correlated with my creepy experience, but I am not the only one who has interesting encounters with strangers since the release in this town. 2 nights ago, after getting off work around 11:30, I came home to my roommates getting ready to go for a night out. I realize now how stupid it was, but we often had an open door policy, free for anyone to come over and visit us as they please. We would lock the door at night, but the one time we forgot really came to bite us, me, in the ass. Around midnight, I was hopping in the shower as my roommates were heading out the door. We said our goodbyes and I told them that I would be meeting up with them later. I had just stepped out of the shower when I heard what sounded like the front door slamming shut. I automatically assumed one of the girls had forgotten something, so I called out their names. No response. I then hear footsteps in the hallway. I call out again. No response. Fear and dread came over me, and I immediately grabbed my clothes and ran into my bedroom. I threw my clothes on, leaning my ear to the door, and waited in silence to hear if someone was in the house. I hear nothing. I decided that it must have been one of my roommates grabbing something and leaving again, so I head into the living room to get my phone. 6 missed calls and it's still ringing. My roommate Carrie was on the other end. I answered and immediately could hear the panic in her voice. "Lee, are you in the house?" "Yes, why, Carrie?" "You need to get out. Sam drove by and said he saw a man walking through the front door. He called the police, but you need to leave." I shit my pants. Nothing was going through my head besides pure adrenaline and fear. I wasn't sure of the man's intentions, but I sure wasn't going to wait and find out. While remaining on the phone with my roommate, I bolted out the front door and hid behind my car. I watched the house from afar, waiting anxiously to see any movement. My thought process was not at its finest at this point, but I now realize I probably could have made smarter decisions. As my friends approached in a truck, I sprinted out from behind my car and jumped in the back of their truck bed. Just as I did that, dark figure scurried off into the woods, running in the opposite direction. I can only assume he had been inching closer to us as I was waiting for them to arrive. I screamed bloody murder and we floored out of there. I refused to go back into the house until the police arrived and it had been triple checked. There were no signs of anything being touched or stolen, which makes me wonder what the man's intentions were. You can guarantee that I've locked my door every night since, and to the strangers who walked into my house while I was in the shower, let's not meet. I am a female corrections officer, prison guard or CO, in a state with a relatively high number of death row inmates. However, few executions are actually carried out. I used to work for a large county, but I work for a different agency now. This county was my first CO job years ago, and before that I had worked in retail and customer service while studying criminal justice, so I was really green. I used to be very liberal. I'm still liberal about a lot of things, but the job does change your perspective for most people. One thing that I used to believe very strongly was that no human being could be truly evil. This particular county jail is one of the oldest in the country, so parts of it have a totally linear layout. What I mean is that you have a long stretch of corridor with cells on either side, and the COs have to walk up and down to supervise the inmates. I am actually giving enough information for anyone with good Google FU skills to figure out a lot. As you can imagine, these linear layouts are not in style anymore, because you cannot see every cell at the same time, but every inmate can see you. I have to say that units like these are extremely creepy too. I'm going to call this corridor the condos. We did not call it that, but I do not want to share the exact term which is specific to this jail. Less than 10 years ago, a quadruple stabbing homicide happened not far from where I grew up. The murderer, Michaels, described it as a butchering, and he killed his former girlfriend, her family and their neighbor, because he came over when he heard the screams. When the police found Michaels soaked in blood and asked him what had happened, he said, "It's obvious, I just killed everyone." The cops said that he seemed completely motionless when he said it. At that time I had only been a CO for about 4 months, and our facility received him as a patrial detainee. Now obviously he wasn't our first or only murder, but the nature of the crime, stabbings, indicate a more dangerous personality than a shooting for one thing, and his lack of remorse was horrifying. He was considered a volatile inmate, so we placed him in an observation cell in the middle of the condos, where a CO could always keep an eye on him. He would stand at his glass door in silence most of the day, just watching everyone. I swear, he only really spoke when he had visits. He actually had a full visits list of these big goth girls who would come in and swear they were in love with him. I don't know if this means anything, but his ex was a big girl, so he used to draw pictures of the fat female COs. For note, he was skinny and white with brown hair. One day, I was working as a utilities officer, basically a floater, who relieves people for breaks and help out as needed. At this jail, utility officers also got away with a ton of downtime and bullshitting. I was hanging out at one end of the condos, where you could look down and see a lot of the jail, talking to another officer on duty. As they say, there are no secrets in jail. Plus, I was aware that there were points throughout the jail where you could hear very well into neighboring cells, that sort of thing. We were being pretty quiet though, plus we stood a good 50 yards from Michael's observation cell. Also, you have to imagine it would be difficult to stand in the observation cell and press your face against the glass to see the people standing at the right angle so far from you. I was telling the other CO a funny story about my weekend, which I wouldn't do out on a correctional unity nowadays, but we weren't getting into anything too personal either. It was a long story involving my fiancé at the time. I wrapped up talking to the CO because I had to go to a gate to relieve another officer for Joe, and I had to pass Michael's cell. I didn't like walking past it because he stood there and stared at you, but back then I wasn't so good at hiding my nervousness. He always had his head slightly tilted down, so you could see white under the irises of his eyes, again rarely saying a word. But today was different. I took one step past his door, and I heard him say, "Edgecombe," in a barely audible whisper. I didn't even know he knew my name. Yes, our last names are on our uniforms, but I was never his primary officer and we'd never interacted. It caught me off guard, so instead of ignoring it, it stopped me in my tracks and I backpedaled to the door. He pointed to his mouth and I leaned in to listen. His eyes looked so dark. I remember I felt hypnotized. He proceeded to recite word for word the story I had just quietly told the other officer at the end of the condos, less than 2 minutes before, even copying the sound of my voice down to a subtle lisp. This seemed to go on forever. I felt like we were the only two there, no 22mm of glass protecting me, just a 5-foot-tall female and a murderer. I remember thinking for the first time of another human being. This is evil and unfixable. Finally I said, "Sir, did you need something?" He started to laugh hysterically and I walked away. I have been assaulted by other inmates. I've had piss thrown in my eyes. People play mind games with me constantly. I've met some damn good lip readers too, but this was like something else. Now I work at a maximum security institution, where I babysit all rapists and murderers and pedophiles. I don't know how to make it make sense to you that this was the one and only time in my life where I felt inside of me like I was dealing with something not human. Michaels is in another institution now. He's on death row. He refuses to appeal. He made it clear to the press that this decision is not out of remorse. He has none. He just doesn't give a shit, and it is most logical in his mind for him to die. Inmate Michaels, if you ever do get out somehow, please, let's never meet again.